I just couldn't get enough of the holiday sewing, so I've got another creepy Halloween project coming for you. I've mentioned the candy bag, the goodie bag. Of course, Mike thinks it would be wiser to give fabric instead of sweet treats. Either way, I've got a super fun project. Let's get started. That's right, I'm gonna dive right into today's tutorial because we've got a lot to cover, although I can't forget our show and tell. So welcome to another fantastic episode of Making It Fun, everybody. I am your host, Rob Appell from Michael Miller Fabrics, and also the radical new hat, and I love the hat, and so I'm wearing it. I hope you all enjoy it as well. Michael Miller just this summer released and is shipped out to the quilt shops. Yeah, basically June, the I Want a Monster from Elise Gravel, this fantastic, super fun line featuring a great border print down here. Of course, the fun polka dots that bring it in all together, some fun words, some fun stripes. But what I'm playing with today for the Halloween treat are the eyeballs, and they come in so many wonderful colors. The orange is what we're going to be using. But so this is just a super fun line. Here you've got your all over little characters, and it did come in two colorways, and I love this gray and kind of teal turquoise way. Super fun, great, fantastic fabric line. So this is in the shop already. They probably have a little bit left. You may need to call before you run down, but of course, frequent your local quilt shop. Ask for I Want a Monster from Elise Gravel, Michael Miller Fabrics, and remember to always support your local quilt shop with all of your creative endeavors. Let me set these aside. Oh, but speaking of local quilt shops, and if this is the first time you've ever seen one of my shows, at the end, we will be sending out a prize to one lucky winner and a prize to the quilt shop of their choice. And playing with the Halloween theme, the scary theme. I did another video a couple of weeks back with the mummy pillow, which was another Halloween video, and I said, hey, I gotta have a scary prize. So yes, I did. I took my shirt off, I posed for the calendar. There's the picture to raise some money for the Sisters Outdoor Quilt Show, Men Behind the Quilts calendar. So it was the scariest prize I could come up with. So yes, I've got a calendar for you and a calendar for the quilt shop of your choice, but I've also got some fantastic glittery fairy frost and some of our fabulous cotton couture, just so that you can play with some of our awesome Michael Miller fabrics. You're thinking, why is he using fairy frost? Why is he using fairy frost? Because our other fabric we're using today are the cotton couture, the black from cotton couture, and the fairy frost. But not only the fairy frost, this is glow in the dark, right? Does it get any better? So I mentioned in the mummy video, this was the supplies. I really wanted to do a candy bag, so we're doing it anyways. I couldn't resist. And what I've already done is I've jumped forward by using the Heat and Bond Easy Print. These are fusible web sheets that I ran through the printer. So I basically jumped on Google, I typed in trick or treat graphics. I came up with the first free set of graphics I could find. I brought them into another window within my computer so I could actually transpose them or flip them horizontally, because whenever you're using fusible web that has a paper back, your image needs to be flipped over. So I did that in the computer, and then I literally shot it right out of the printer. And because it takes a little time to press that onto the back side of the fairy frost fabrics, I also then cut out my little decoration, right? So my trick or treat logo, this side is the glow in the dark side, and I've prepped out the beginning of our exterior of our bag panel. So I have my eyeballs right now. We've made this at 12 inches by 24 inches. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my letters right on top. We're going to sew a little black cuff on the top of the bag too. So I've also got my cotton couture for straps and also for the black cuff. So we'll be getting there, but I just peeled that off real quick. I want to make sure, the reason I'm pointing that out right now is I'm leaving a good, let's say 1 inch from the top. And whenever you're dealing with the Heat and Bond Featherlight, I don't want you to over iron it. So what I really want to do is I'm going to take right now, I'm just eyeballing this to make sure it's roughly centered. I also had the little fill-in pieces for the letters themselves. So I'm going to drop them into place right now. I'll often use like a stiletto or a pair of tweezers to manipulate them or move them around, because I want to be able to set those centers while I'm setting the rest of the applique. I chose lettering that would work very nicely for the cutting and the project process itself. So there's a lot of really fun things you can find on the internet, but this was one that was going to be super easy to handle this way and would give me a lot of glow in the dark without having to manipulate a lot of little letters. So everything's in place right where I want it. I have my iron hot but dry, and now I'm just going to press down and lift, press down and lift, because I don't want to slide those little parts of the letters into the wrong spot. And because this is a candy bag, you basically are done at this moment. But I really wanted to do a couple of extra special learning things today. So we're going to talk a little bit more about free motion just for a second. Of course, I've talked about it a little bit before, but I also want to talk about French seams. So we're going to dive into this as a French seams project. How cool does that look, right? Okay, but technically, because we're not going to probably ever wash this, we don't have to stitch around it, but let's just take the moment. We wouldn't want our kids' goodie bag, like it's really for our kids, right? We wouldn't want our kids' goodie bag coming apart in the middle of all of that fantastic holiday fare. So, at any rate, I have dropped the feed dogs on my sewing machine. I've put out a free motion machine quilting foot. I have a light gray, neutral white thread, basically, and I'm going to stitch starting right on the center of that O if I can, and I want to do a single stitch down and up to bring up my bobbin thread. And yes, that was my finger I just poked with the needle in case you were listening closely. So we're just going to stitch around. But because we are not dealing with high-end, this is not going to Houston for an award. This is not a Paducah quilt. I'm basically at this moment just going to go ahead and let my needle come up. And now that I've secured that, I'm going to just float to this outside edge real quick. Make sure my presser foot is still down though. And I'm going to go ahead and start stitching away, leaving what I would call a jump stitch, because I don't like to look at these threads while I'm machine quilting. So I am going to pull them out of the way, and that way I can tell what I've finished. And I'm just going to nicely, but very actually quickly, work my way around. This was a great practice. And I'm just going to look at that. Just drop right into this letter R. So we need to go around the inside and outside cut, basically. I'm not going to do a bunch of starts and stops. You may if you want, but it's not really necessary. And one of the things that I'm doing this with in this video is the lettering's supposed to kind of look kind of creepy or slimy or whatnot. So like, hey, and you notice I just jumped to that outside edge. What I'm also trying to say here right now is if it doesn't look terrific, let's not sweat it. It's a candy bag. For your kids, right. When you're machine quilting, if your needle's running a little faster, you can see I've just picked up the pace. It actually makes it easier to manipulate. I do not recommend standing and bending over like I'm doing. I'm just doing this to get a good video in my beautiful set here. Just going to take a second, double check to make sure I have everything I needed stitched down all around all the letters. I do have one spot and it's too far away, so now I'm going to take a couple stitches in place, use the built-in thread cutter for the machine. Now that I've jumped down, I'm just going to hang on to the thread for the needle though, because I did use that thread cutter. That just helps secure that knot a little bit. Now all of the free motion machine quilting is done on our exterior of our trick or treat. Let's go ahead and get this machine reset quickly for our straight sewing, and I'm just going to go ahead and put on my standard presser foot, and I'm going to use an edge guide today, as I often do, because we're doing French seams. And now maybe you've never done a French seam. The reason we do a French seam is to get rid of all the raw edges. It is obviously not a requirement inside of a treat bag. However, it's a great place to practice. And I thought it'd be just something fun to address in today's tutorial. I'm actually setting my seam allowance for even a little bit less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the first thing we're going to want to do to practice our French seams, and again, this is not an all requirement in here, is we're going to build it onto our top and bottom of our bag by putting on these cuffs. So I had my black cotton couture. I made 4-inch strips. I have one that is 4 by the width of the goods, 44 inches, and I have the other 2 that are 4 inches by the 12, and these are going to match right in here. So all sewing we've always been taught, and this is why we're using a print today, all sewing we've always been taught we go right sides together for our sewing. But on a French seam, we actually start with wrong sides together and a narrow seam allowance. So we're going to do that now. I've come over to the sewing machine. I'm going to set this right at the edge of my presser foot so it's less than my 1/4 inch seam allowance for the beginning. I'm going to stitch this through. We're going to do the same to the other side now, because then we're going to adjust our seam allowance, okay? So I have that, and that looks wrong. That's how we're going to need it. So that's my long strip. There it is. It matched the ironing board. Okay, not right sides together, but wrong sides together. That's why we're using the print so you can tell. Back to that narrow seam allowance. Okay, and now that that's made, what we're really going to do is we're going to fold it over, and this is where I like to hit it with the iron. Just kind of pressing into the print there. Let's do the same on this other side. We don't have to worry about pressing on top of our applique now because we've stitched it down. It will not release. But now that that's pressed this way, let's go first and adjust our seam allowance. So now we're going to take it out past the 1/4 inch. And now as I'm sewing here, and come back to the reveal, you can see that I've got a beautiful finished edge, and I'm just going to hit that with the iron while we're here. And this is also extending out the height of our bag, a couple inches on each side. So again, we're now going to right sides together. You just want to make sure you're not catching any of the first sewing in the second sewing, because it will show up out there. You may need to adjust your seam allowance even wider here. Perfect. And if you thought I was going to let you get away with just doing it right there, heck no, we're doing the whole bag that way. So let's keep on practicing, finishing out now both of the sides of the bag the exact same way. So we're going to go wrong sides together. And I'm going to line it up so my black cuff pieces match up nice up there. Nice up here. We're going to adjust that seam allowance way back down to narrow. Okay. And then we're going to start, you know what we're going to do, just in case, we're going to start at the bottom corner because that's the wise way of doing this. With our narrow little seam allowance, so you want to make sure your edges are lined. And matching up beautifully. Let's back stitch at the top there. We'll do the same to the other side, so we're going to start at the bottom corner. That same narrow seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to take our bag, and right now we are literally going now to right sides together. And now we want to widen out that seam allowance again. Just let it rip on through. Do the same thing to the other side, of course. That seam allowance is already adjusted for wide, so we're good to go. Awesome. We have two last steps I want to do. I want to go ahead, three. I want to box the corners. I want to finish this top edge, and we can put on a real quick strap if you'd like. Super easy that way. So let's start by boxing the corners while it's out here. And of course, you're going to want to check to make sure your seam allowance has worked. But while it's so nice and flat like this, we're just going to lay it. And I like to take a ruler and a marker. And I just like to come down what's going to be basically 2 inches. And I have my line running along my seam, so I have a nice straight edge. And I just make a mark there because that was my perpendicular. And I just run it right over to the machine. Back stitch across. I'm a big fan of always double stitching my box corners. And I'm not going to cut these off the bag because we're talking about making it so that the bag has no raw edges. And if I just cut those off in there, I would have just gone against all of our hard work we had done with our awesome French seams. So now I'm going to drop that back in, draw that same line. Super easy. Let's get it stitched into place as well. Of course, securing that side again. Don't want my candy falling out. This is a candy bag, not a piñata that we're making here. Oh, I think I'm so funny. Wild. Okay, now to finish our top cuff, super easy, and it will still kill all of our raw edges. I'm going to fold it down one time, roughly 1/4 inch, okay? And this is one of these things that we just do after sewing enough years. You kind of just get your hands familiar with the way things work. So I can even try to talk about it while nitpicking or thread picking there. So I'm coming down roughly 1/4. Now I'm going to do it again to kill that raw edge. But really, I'm only going to focus on one little spot. And that's where the seam is. And I'm going to come over to my sewing machine. And now, right now, I have white thread in here. You might want to use black thread, you know, just so it doesn't show up. It might look pretty cool with the white thread. But I'm going to begin, whoa, a little fast. I'm going to begin top stitching, but while rolling that double fold edge underneath. I'm looking at this line too. So technically, I am eyeballing all of this work right now. If I was making a real elegant piece, of course, I would measure all this out. That's not true. I would not be making an elegant piece. Sewing for me is fun and utilitarian. Best candy bags in town. I actually have the best shopping bags in town too. And the reusable grocery bags are pretty rock star. Thread cut there. And our awesome boxed corner trick-or-treat bag, no raw edge, on the fly. How radical is that? Awesome. Now I want to put the handles in right here. So what we're going to do now, like I said, I've taken these 45-inch goods by 4 inches. I need to take the selvage off real quick off the bottom. So we're just going to trim that off there. And now I'm literally just going to go right sides together with my 1/4 inch seam allowance and just make myself a nice long tube. One long tube, just like yay. Obviously that's probably more than we need. So you actually might want to size it to your bag to begin with because we're going to have to turn this right sides out. So for me, I think that's going to be good there. I'm going to call it 30 inches. That was pretty close. Made a wide enough tube, though, that it wasn't a monster to turn right back out. Pun intended. I love my Halloween jokes. And while we're turning this out, I want to know, I want you all to be thinking about it. I haven't asked the question yet, and we will get to the mystery question here in just a second. As a matter of fact, as soon as I have this strap on. But I want to know, what are you all going to be for Halloween as you're walking those kids around, of course. When I'm making straps and handles, I like to go ahead and then take a moment and iron so that seam kind of falls in the middle of what will be the inside or the back side of the strap. Okay, and now what we're going to do, because that's technically a raw edge, you can turn it inside or you can just fold it up underneath, real nice and easy. Take it over to your machine and do a basting stitch across it. On both sides, of course, making sure you're turning them both inside to where that seam is. And now you can go ahead and just bring it onto your bag, and the easiest way to position this is literally at the bottom of that same stripe, and then if your stripes didn't match up perfect, if you know what I'm saying at, you can line those in here. Let's get this edge guide out of the way, because I want to stitch this on the bottom area first. So I'm making sure now as I bring this into the machine, I only have one layer of the bag. All my seams lined up. And I'm going to go stitch, stitch, back stitch across. All the way over, back stitch again. Cut those threads. And now I'm going to bring it up here and I'm going to line it up into my top stitching. How cool is that? just like that. Okay, so I've got that side. I flip it. Make sure you keep it lined up as you need. Make any other adjustments. This is the time to do it. And this is when you want to be nice and careful when we come back in, because now you've got the loop connected on the other side as well. And if it makes your life easier, of course, you could stitch here first, lining up the top stitching. Then you can drop down here to the bottom. And right on top of that top stitching, do it all over again. And you, my friends, are all set, ready to go with your awesome trick-or-treat candy bag. Go out, fill it all up, rot those teeth, have a great holiday. Oh, it's super fun. Again, I want to know what you're going to dress up as for Halloween, but it is time to give away our super awesome prizes. Remember, the scary prize, the calendar with me in it, and the awesome prize, the Fairy Frost and the Cotton Couture, a bundle for each you and your favorite quilt shop. So let me know. I'm getting out the mystery questions right now. I ask a question. You answer the question in the comments below on this video. I'm just going to thumb through here real quick, not even looking. Here comes the question. I'm super excited. Oh, this is a good one. What is your go-to karaoke song? The rest of the question is, can you sing a little bit for us? No, but why don't you sing some for the rest of the folks in the house so that they are all making it as much fun as we did here today with our awesome trick-or-treat bag, French seams, a little free motion. Oh my gosh, it's wild, it's crazy. We'll see you next week. Enjoy yourselves. Thanks for being here. I'm glad to see you're still there. Hey, if you insist on spending all day on YouTube, great with me. Please check out a few of my other videos. I think they're fantastic. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified. We'll see you next time for another helping of fun.